As always for a Little Red's transfer installment, there's a lot to get through, so I think it makes sense for us to discuss Énouement first, and then move on to what we learned from the content the Little Red's transfer team has been finding and sharing with us. One big thing we learned from this little side series episode is that Illusion Plus Entertainment was struggling by the year of 2008, something that has already been hinted at a little bit given that we know from the past videos just how many different things Illusion Plus has stretched the Little Red's franchise into by the 1980s, and how Marine Mania's video has specifically spoken about diversifying and looking for new angles by which to support the business. After all, going from a frozen custard stand to many different eateries and even a mall complex doesn't seem like too strange a path for a company to grow. The cruise liners though seemed a much bigger leap, even if they still kind of made some sense. Here we hear about Little Red's world of Fathom, and from teasers we saw prior to Énouement, and even during this video we can guess that it might have been some kind of fairground or theme park, or maybe even just attached to one. We do hear that Illusion Plus fully owns the location of the underground parties, noted to be a park, yet seems to be running it into the ground. We also see Hoko being advertised as being part of the world of Fathom, yet the Preservative Project team is here collecting him. We also get introduced to a number of new characters, one of whom is Alex Burrow, who seems to be the daughter of the Mr. Burrow who is currently in charge of Illusion Plus. She's taken over most of his duties by the time of the video footage we see and hear, and there is also a person named Austin who wants to take over the company but will most likely not be allowed to when Mr. Burrow passes. Who the replacement for Mr. Burrow will be is unclear, but Tony and Alex do discuss a person named Haynes who, from the sound of it, runs the competing business, Happy Valley, to Illusion Plus. It also seems to be having some problems. However, at the same time, Haynes is paying a lot for something, seemingly the job that the team is currently on in Nashville. Tony notes that Haynes owns everything in the place they're at, which makes me suspect that Haynes is on the brink of taking over Illusion Plus, and indeed does in the future. Notably, we hear Tony talking about how Harry's Frozen Emporium had been closed down in the 2008 conversation. Yet we know from JJ's podcast, which we can theorise was recorded around the year 2013, that Harry's Frozen Emporium had reopened, which suggests that there was a turnaround in the fortunes of the company that owned it, which we now know is Happy Valley. I suspect that Hoko might have originally been a part of one of Haynes' past failed ventures, and so he had the Preservative Project relocate the fortune teller machine to the world of Fathom as part of his guiding hand on Illusion Plus. Tony also notes that the mascot of Happy Valley had been something ugly that had scared kids and looked like roadkill, but then said it's supposed to be a hog, a pig. Pigs have already played a significant role in Little Red so far, usually as the villains or as the symbol of bad things. This makes me wonder if the narrative we've seen before of the pig stealing Lox's porridge could be a metaphor for Haynes stealing Illusion Plus from someone. Maybe Mr. Burrow or someone else who had a claim to it. It could also be that the pig we see in the footage from Marine Mania is related now to Happy Valley's mascot, if indeed Haynes was successful in taking over Illusion Plus Entertainment from the Burrow family. As well as Alex and Tony, we also get to see dashcam footage from the car of another team, who we can make a guess might be on the way to join the team where Alex and Tony are, and may even be the other three people pictured who aren't known to be Alex and Tony. However, Oscar does know that the team was on their way to another Preservative Project venture. From these guys, Cooper Leslie, Alan Koskin and Alex Hazeld, we learn that Illusion Plus was very strict on the employees who were part of the Preservative Project, making sure they didn't damage vehicles or take anything they were supposed to be recovering for the company. This does fall in line with how we previously heard that Illusion Plus doesn't like their employees asking questions or snooping around. It fits with the entire "they're hiding something" suspicion we've had since the first video. We also know that they were sent to fly and coil the clock on that particular job, with the character being well known enough that at least two of the people in the car were aware of him. However, supposing that the coil they went to fetch is the same one that Oscar acquired at the start of the video, someone may have managed to get hold of Coil and leave with him before the Preservative Project could find him. We also know that something happened to the car group on their way to their job, and if the violent way the footage ends and the photo of the car are anything to go by, it was very, very forceful. Either directly by the storm, or possibly by having said storm hide the car from the sight of another large oncoming vehicle based on the loud noise we hear, which sounds very train-like to me. In that case, what became of Cooper, Alan and Alice at that point is up in the air, and they may very well have been hurt, or worse. Finally, we have the third section of the video which, according to Oscar, seems to have been recorded without the knowledge of the people on the phone. This one seems to be a conversation between two people, one of whom may be Arthur Maldrow, a member of the Little Red transfer team in the present day. He too was in Nashville on the day in question, and might even have been in the warehouse at the same time as Alex and Tony were that day, given that at one point he tells the other person that he can see her, which could be Alex. Otherwise, the only other things we can learn from this call alone was that Illusion Plus had a fully owned location that was being run into the ground seemingly, a place that was being used by employees to host underground parties, which Alex may or may not have been okay with, or even known about. However, with the third image recovered from the email, we can make a guess that Arthur was talking to Luke. Either Mardrow or Lowe is unclear, as both have a reason to be the other person, if indeed they're not one and the same. This means that both of these men were, in 2008, Illusion Plus employees. As for what Arthur was doing in the warehouse, the note suggests that he was there to recover things to keep them out of the hands of Illusion Plus and the Preservative Project. Arthur might even have been the one who managed to sneak out Coil, although why is unclear. As of yet, we don't know if Arthur was seeking information as part of the Preservative Project, or if he was trying to recover Coil because he somehow knew something about it he shouldn't. This leads me to question whether the discs Oscar would later find in the clock were hidden there by Arthur himself. If so, why would he try to hide them in 2008, but be actively seeking them with the team now? I'm much more inclined to think that whatever Arthur was there for was something else. But speaking of the clock, this makes yet another set of discs that have been hidden somewhere. We had a CD hidden in a CD cabinet, a set of documents, discs and video cassettes in the backing of a wooden cabinet, and now a computer disc hidden inside of a clock. It makes me question just who is hiding all this stuff. At least for Coil, I suspect that maybe it was a member of the Preservative Project who we see in this video. We know that these recordings were mandated by Illusion Plus, so the employees on the job would have had easy access to the files and were maybe able to hide them. Or potentially it was someone in the department who had to store these files, someone who was able to make copies and hide them in Coil before sending the little clock out into the world. Also of note is that the person who contacted Oscar regarding the clock was from Hot Springs, a place in Arkansas. We've already seen that a lot of past events have taken place in Arkansas. Most notably, it is the location of the Party 91st incident, as well as being the location for the warehouse Ivan was chased through shortly before he disappeared. If so, was Coil transported there from Nashville? Or was he always located somewhere in Arkansas? Checking the distance between Nashville and Hot Springs, the driving distance between the two is only 6 hours, which for America is nothing. There's a possibility that whoever had Coil had driven out to Hot Springs to ditch the clock, fearing Illusion Plus would catch up to them eventually. Also, the route from Nashville to Hot Springs passes through Little Rock, the place where the Party 91st incident occurred. This places a lot of events close together in a relatively small area, for the USA I mean. Quite a few of the Little Red transfer videos are also marked as being located in Hot Springs, which is an interesting detail. The fact that we also first see Coil in this video on a handheld camcorder makes me wonder if maybe, just maybe, the person who had Coil was none other than Eric. We know that Eric liked to vlog, so maybe the man who was tired of this life with his friends disappearing dropped Coil off in the store in Hot Springs, then emailed Oscar to pass the clock on to someone who wasn't yet tired of the hunt for information. Also of note to me is that Oscar notes he was just in time to get the clock, which also makes me think that someone else was also after it. Could Illusion Plus have known where Coil was and was on their way to get it too? He also mentions that when he contacted the shop to get more details about where the clock came from, Oscar asked about the items, plural. What else did Oscar manage to acquire? What we see from the extra media the Little Red Transfer team has shown us doesn't tell us too many concrete things, but there does seem to be a common person who keeps popping up in all of them, Eric. If you don't remember, Eric is one of the original 4 we learned about in the first video, being the person who was being sent Ivan's backhaul messages. I'd previously theorised that Eric might be the person who the ghosts in the tape were attempting to reach during the Vessel of Notion set of tapes and media. That maybe Eric was the sole one of the 4 still alive and willing to help out. Here though we learn a few things about the man. Eric was at the New Year's party that Ivan didn't feel up to attending, and was the person vlogging the event, which is apparently something he did a lot. The camera he was using that night was given to him by Ivan, whom Eric jokes about being a scammer and tells the person on the other side of the text conversation that they know how he is. This reads as Eric insinuating that Ivan was known to do things that could be seen as a little dubious. We also see that during the same text conversation that he was mostly concerned with whether a girl was eyeing him up as opposed to anything else. Of course, we don't know when the text conversation took place, but it seems to be soon after the party and before people realised that Ivan was missing. Otherwise, you'd expect the conversation to be on that subject instead of a New Year's party. Also, Eric's image seems to appear a lot in these files, which the team themselves point out. They also think that Eric might have been the one to run a YouTube channel which a number of discarded videos they found might be from. It seems that around the start of 2011, Eric was fine and in high spirits. However, we know that he left messages for the tribute video for Ivan, and in fact looking at it again, there is only one named sign-off, his. This makes me wonder if the video isn't full of multiple tributes, but instead just one long one, all of it from Eric. If so, Eric was very close to Ivan and thanks the man multiple times for loving him. We do know that if the voice we heard leaving a message for Tonya in Vessel of Notion was Eric, then losing Ivan was probably the first step on the downward path that led to him saying on the left phone message that he was tired of this life. Which could mean that he was tired of looking into the Party 91st incident which caused all of his friends to vanish on him. He could also have been the one to edit in the blue screens around the New Year's party video, lamenting that he hadn't been with Ivan when the man vanished. One of the extra images that appears in that video is the 1988 title card, and we know that while Ivan edited it, Eric was due to look over it afterwards, so he had access to that footage to be able to cut it in. So it almost seems like Eric continued what Ivan had started after Ivan disappeared, but after a few years began to feel the pressure of such a task and maybe gave up, if my theory about him being the one who ditched the clock is true. The auto responses from the Carno Avo email give us a little bit of background into the team itself. Started December 5th, 2019, the spark that set it off was Arthur finding an old training tape on an out-of-place disc in his father's desk. We hear that the tape was from 1988 and it was for a Mega Mall, both details which line up perfectly with the very first video of Little Red's transfer ever. He then tried to take it public, eventually ending up bringing it to Aquanta, and together they made it public with the first Little Red's video. However, hitting option 9 for a detailed explanation of their project only gets us the broken silent response video, so there's more details yet to come. The images we've gotten from the email too tell us that while Alex was in charge, not everyone agreed with this. We see at least 2 notes that seem to be complaining about her being in charge, with one moaning that she wasn't even working that hard, especially when Tony was around. While we don't actually know if Alex and Tony did like each other, from what we hear of their conversations they seem very close, to the point that Tony is someone who Alex feels able to confide in her worries about the fight between her father and Austin. The interesting thing about those 2 notes expressing discontent with Alex being in charge is one of them is overlaid over the photo of the car, the one that talks about never being good enough and being used as an ashtray by someone we can assume is Mr. Burrow. From what we hear in this video, the only person who seems entitled to calling the shots and has a dislike for Mr. Burrow is Austin. Could I be right about there being a 4th person in the car, and was it Austin? Now, with all this, are there more guesses we can make about what was going on? Possibly. For example, to go back to my last big video, I talked a bit about the man in the suit and how he appears in the training videos from 1988 and 2013 with little changes made to it. My question now is, are they actually 2 different men? Is the bow tie wearing man representative of Hayden Burrow, and is the tie wearing man Austin? If Haynes has taken control of Illusion Plus, maybe he's used Austin to do it, using the unchosen successor as a figurehead while he is the real person in control. The other question I have is to do with the shoebox that was the source of much of the media covered in the Wix site blog post. If it was kept by the writer's father, how did he get his hands on both the What Went Wrong and the In Your Memory video? Was the reason that the last 20 seconds were separated from In Your Memory because Eric had been asked to make it for the service, but knew he wasn't welcome there, so cut out his name from the end? And why wasn't he welcome at the funeral in that case? And then there are the further guesses at some of what we've seen in the past. If we know that the Happy Valley franchise's mascot was a hog or pig, does that mean that the pig-masked men had something to do with Happy Valley in that case? And as for what we hear both Hopper and Humming Humpty say in their individual videos, could it be that those lines that don't seem to fit into the lines from a cartoon show mould are actually the words of someone else? A while back, Aquanta told us to see who these characters represented in the real world. So could Hopper and Humming Humpty be speaking words spoken by who they are meant to represent in that case? I don't really know. All I know is that once again there's a lot of information to pick through, and so many different narratives to try and untangle and connect back together. We do have some idea of what else should be coming soon thanks to this series update post video uploaded a few months back, and I'll link in its description to show what the order of releases should be. Up next we look to be visiting the Scout Star Mega Mall, place we've seen hinted at a few times recently, in a commercial. Then a home video called Summer House, another commercial for a Little Red's activity book, then finally Little Red's Transfer 3, Youth Culture. Further below that, we can just about make out that Little Red Transfer 3 will be followed by another commercial for a talking Humpty doll, which is going to be interesting as we know that Humming Humpty wasn't exactly the most popular character of the gang. All we can do, as always, is wait for more content and information while we theorise on what we already have.